Vlad III, mostly known as Vlad the Impaler or Vlad Dracula, as we all know now as Dracula, was the voivode of Wallacha 3 times between 1448 and his death. He is often considered one of the most important rulers in Wallachian history and a national hero of Romania. He was the second son of Vlad Dracula, who became the ruler of Wallacha in 1436. Vlad and his younger brother, Radu, were held hostage in the Ottoman Empire in 1442 to secure their father's loyalty. Vlad's father and eldest brother, Mircea, were murdered after John Hunyadi, regent governor of Hungary, invaded Wallacha in 1447. Hunyadi installed Vlad's second cousin, Vladislav II, as the new voivode. Hunyadi launched a military campaign against the Ottomans in the autumn of 1448, and Vladislav accompanied him. Vlad broke into Wallacha with Ottoman support in October, but Vladislav returned and Vlad sought refuge in the Ottoman Empire before the end of the year. Vlad went to Moldavia in 1449 or 1450, and later to Hungary. Relations between Hungary and Vladislav later deteriorated, and in 1456 Vlad invaded Wallacha with Hungarian support. Vladislav died fighting against him. Vlad began a purge among Wallachian boyars to strengthen his position. He came into conflict with the Transylvanian Saxons, who supported his opponents, Dan and Basarab Laeta, who were Vladislav's brothers, and Vlad's illegitimate half-brother, Vlad the Monk. Vlad plundered the Saxon villages, taking the captured people to Wallacha where he had them impaled, which inspired his cognomen. Peace was restored in 1460. The Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, ordered Vlad to pay homage to him personally, but Vlad had the Sultan's 2 envoys captured and impaled. In February 1462, he attacked Ottoman territory, massacring tens of thousands of Turks and Bulgarians. Mehmed launched a campaign against Wallacha to replace Vlad with Vlad's younger brother, Radu. Vlad attempted to capture the Sultan of Targovice during the night of 16 or 17 June 1462. The Sultan and the main Ottoman army left Wallacha, but more and more Wallachans deserted Radu. Vlad went to Transylvania to seek assistance from Matthias Corvness, king of Hungary, in late 1462, but Corvness had him imprisoned. Vlad was held in captivity from 1463 to 1475. During this period, anecdotes about his cruelty started to spread in Germany and Italy. He was released at the request of Stephen III of Moldavia in the summer of 1475. He fought in Corvness's army against the Ottoman in Bosnia in early 1476. Hungarian and Moldavian troops helped him to force Basarab Laeta to flee from Wallacha in November. Basarab returned with Ottoman support before the end of the year. Vlad was killed in battle before January 1477. Books describing Vlad's cruel acts were among the first bestsellers in the German-speaking territories. In Russia, popular stories suggested that Vlad was able to strengthen central government only through applying brutal punishments, and a similar view was adopted by most Romanian historians in the 19th century. Vlad's reputation for cruelty and his patronymic inspired the name of the vampire Count Dracula. The expression Dracula, which is now primarily known as the name of a fictional vampire for centuries known as the sobriquet of Vlad III. Diplomatic reports and popular stories referred to him as Dracula, or Dracula already in the 15th century. He himself signed his 2 letters as Dragula or Dracula in the late 1470s. His name had its origin in the sobriquet of his father, Vlad Dracula, who received it after he became a member of the Order of the Dragon. Dracula is the Slavonic genitive form of Dracul, meaning the son of Dracul or the dragon. In modern Romanian, Dracul means the devil, which contributed to Vlad's reputation. Vlad III is known as Vlad Tepes in Romanian historiography. This sobriquet is connected to the impalement that was his favorite method of execution. The Ottoman writer Tursun Beg referred to him as Kazakh, meaning impaler lord, around 1500. Mircea the Shepherd, voivode of Wallacha, used this sobriquet when referring to Vlad III in a letter of grant on 1 April 1551. Vlad was the second legitimate son of Vlad II Dracul, who was an illegitimate son of Mircea I of Wallacha. Vlad II had won the moniker Dracula for his membership in the Order of the Dragon, a militant fraternity founded by Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. The Order of the Dragon was dedicated to halting the Ottoman advance into Europe. As he was old enough to be a candidate to the throne of Wallacha in 1448, his time of birth would have been between 1428 and 1431. Vlad was probably born after his father settled in Transylvania in 1429. Historian Vladislav writes that Vlad was born in the Transylvanian Saxon town of Sugistelora, where his father lived in a 3-story stone house from 1431 to 1435. Modern historians identify Vlad's mother either as a daughter of Alexander I of Moldavia or as his father's unknown first wife. Vlad Dracula seized Wallacha after the death of his half-brother Alexander Aldea in 1436. One of his charters preserved the first reference to Vlad III and his elder brother, Mircea, mentioning them as their father's firstborn sons. They were mentioned in 4 further documents between 1437 and 1439. The last of the 4 charters also referred to their younger brother, Radu. After meeting with John Hunyadi, voivode of Transylvania, Vlad Dracula did not support an Ottoman invasion of Transylvania in March 1442. The Ottoman Sultan, Murad, ordered him to come to Gallipoli to demonstrate his loyalty. Vlad and Radu accompanied their father to the Ottoman Empire, where they were all imprisoned. Vlad Dracula was released before the end of the year, but Vlad and Radu remained hostages to secure his loyalty. They were held imprisoned in the fortress of Egergaz, according to contemporaneous Ottoman chronicles. Their lives were especially in danger after their father supported Vladislav, King of Poland and Hungary, against the Ottoman Empire during the Crusade of Varna in 1444. Vlad Dracula was convinced that his 2 sons were butchered for the sake of Christian peace, but neither Vlad nor Radu was murdered or mutilated after their father's rebellion. Vlad Dracula again acknowledged the Sultan's suzerainty and promised to pay a yearly tribute to him in 1446 or 7. John broke into Wallacha in November 1447. The Byzantine historian Michael Critobulus wrote that Vlad and Radu had fled to the Ottoman Empire, which suggests that the Sultan had allowed them to return to Wallacha after their father paid homage to him. Vlad Dracula and his eldest son, Mircea, were murdered. Hunyadi made Vladislav the ruler of Wallacha. Upon the death of his father and elder brother, Vlad became a potential claimant to Wallacha. Vladislav of Hunyadi, who launched a campaign against the Ottoman Empire in September 1448. Taking advantage of his opponent's absence, Vlad broke into Wallacha at the head of an Ottoman army in early October. He had to accept that the Ottomans had captured the fortress of Giurgiu on the Danube and strengthened it. The Ottomans defeated Hunyadi's army in the Battle of Kosovo between the 17th and 18th October. Hunyadi's deputy, Nicholas Vyzani, urged Vlad to come to meet him in Transylvania, but Vlad refused him. Vladislav returned to Wallacha at the head of the remnants of his army. Vlad was forced to flee to the Ottoman Empire before 7 December 1448. Vlad first settled in Edirne in the Ottoman Empire after his fall. Not long after, he moved to Moldavia, where Bogdan, his father's brother-in-law and possibly his maternal uncle, had mounted the throne with John Hunyadi's support in the autumn of 1449. After Bogdan was murdered by Peter Aaron in October 1451, Bogdan's son, Stefan, fled to Transylvania with Vlad to seek assistance from Hunyadi. However, Hunyadi concluded a 3-year truce with the Ottoman Empire on 20 November 1451, acknowledging the Wallachian boyar's right to elect the successor of Vladislav if he died. Vlad allegedly wanted to settle Vladislavs, but Hunyadi forbade the burghers to give shelter to him on 6 February 1452. Vlad returned to Moldavia where Alexandro had dethroned Peter Aaron. The events of his life during the years that followed are unknown. He must have returned to Hungary before the 3rd of July 1456, because on that day Hungary informed the townspeople of Brașov that he had tasked Vlad with the defense of the Transylvania border. The circumstances and the date of Vlad's return to Wallacha are uncertain. He invaded Wallacha with Hungarian support either in April, July, or August 1456. Vladislav died during the invasion. Vlad sent his first extant letter as voivode of Wallacha to the burghers of Brasov on 10th of September. He promised to protect them in case of an Ottoman invasion of Transylvania, but he also sought their assistance if the Ottomans occupied Wallacha. In the same letter, he stated that when a man or prince is strong and powerful he can make peace as he wants to, but when he is weak, a stronger one will come and do what he wants to him, showing his authoritarian personality. Multiple sources recorded that hundreds of thousands of people were executed at Vlad's order at the beginning of his reign. He began a purge against the boyars who had participated in the murder of his father and elder brother, or whom he suspected of plotting against him. Chalkukandils stated that Vlad quickly effected a great change and utterly revolutionized the affairs of Wallacha, although granting the money, property, and other goods of his victims to his retainers. The list of the members of the princely council during Vlad's reign also shows that only two of them, Voice and Diava, were able to retain their positions between 1457 and 1461. Vlad sent the customary tribute to the Sultan. After John Hunyadi died on 11th August 1456, his elder son, Ladislaus Hunyadi, became the Captain General of Hungary. He accused Vlad of having no intention of remaining faithful to the King of Hungary in a letter to the burghers of Brasov, also ordering them to support Vladislav's brother, Dan, against Vlad. The burghers of Subiu supported another pretender, a priest of the Romanians who calls himself a prince's son. The latter took possession of Umlis, which had customarily been held by the rulers of Wallacha and Transylvania. Ladislaus of Hungary had Ladislaus Hunyadi executed on 16 March 1457. Hunyadi's mother, Erzsébet Szilágyi, and her brother, Michael Szilágyi, stirred up a rebellion against the king. Taking advantage of the civil war in Hungary, Vlad assisted Stefan, son of Bogdan of Moldavia, in June 1457. Vlad also broke the villages around Brasov and Sibiu. The earliest German stories about Vlad recounted that he had carried men, women, children, from a Saxon village to Wallacha and had them impaled. Since the Transylvanian Saxons remained loyal to the king, Vlad's attack against them strengthened the position of the Szilágyis. Vlad's representatives participated in the peace negotiations between Michael Szilágyi and the Saxons. According to their treaty, the burghers of Brasov agreed that they would expel Dan from their town. Vlad promised that the merchants of Sibiu could freely buy and sell goods in Wallacha in exchange for the same treatment of the Wallachian merchants in Transylvania. Vlad referred to Michael Szilágyi as his lord and elder brother in a letter on 1 December 1457. Ladislaus Hunyadi's younger brother, Matthias Corvness, was elected king of Hungary on 24 January 1458. He ordered the burghers of Subiu to keep the peace with Vlad on 3 March. Vlad styled himself lord and ruler over all of Wallacha, and the duchies of Umlis and Faharas on 20 September 1459, showing that he had taken possession of both of these traditional Transylvanian fiefs of the rulers of Wallacha. Michael Szilágyi allowed the boyar Michael and other Wallachian boyars to settle in Transylvania in late March 1458. Before long, Vlad had the boyar Michael killed. In May, Vlad asked the burghers of Brasov to send craftsmen to Wallacha, but his relationship with the Saxons deteriorated before the end of the year. According to a scholarly theory, the conflict that emerged after Vlad's protectionist tendencies or border flares is not documented. Instead, in 1476 Vlad emphasized that he had always promoted free trade during his reign. The Saxons confiscated the steel that a Wallachian merchant had brought in Brasov without repaying the price to him. In response, Vlad ransacked and tortured some Saxon merchants, according to a letter that Basarab Laïda wrote on 21 January 1459. Basarab has settled in Siasora and laid claim to Wallacha. However, Matthias Corvness supported Dan against Vlad. Dan stated that Vlad had Saxon merchants and their children impaled or burnt alive. Dan broke into Wallacha, but Vlad defeated and executed him before 22nd April 1460. Vlad invaded southern Transylvania and destroyed the suburbs of Brasov, ordering the impalement of all men and women who had been captured. During the ensuing negotiations, Vlad demanded the expulsion or punishment of all Wallachian refugees from Brasov. Peace had been restored before 26 July 1460 when Vlad addressed the burghers of Brasov as his brothers and friends. Vlad invaded the region around Imlas and Fagaras on 24 August to punish the local inhabitants who have supported Dan III. Konstantin Mihailovic recorded that Vlad refused to pay homage to the Sultan in an unspecified year. The Renaissance historian Giovanni Maria degli Angioli likewise wrote that Vlad had failed to pay tribute to the Sultan for 3 years. Both records suggest that Vlad ignored the suzerainty of the Ottoman Sultan, memmed already in 1459, but both works were written decades after the events. Tursunbeg stated that Vlad only turned against the Ottoman Empire when the Sultan was away on the long expedition in Trebizond in 1461. According to Tursunbeg, Vlad started new negotiations with Matthias Corvness, but the Sultan was soon informed by his spies. Mem sends his envoy, the Greek Thomas Katabolinos, to Wallacha, ordering Vlad to come to Constantinople. He also sent secret instructions to Hamza, Bey of Nicopolis, to capture Vlad after he crossed the Danube. Vlad found out the Sultan's deceit and trickery, captured Hamza and Katabolinos, and had them executed. After the execution of the Ottoman officials, Vlad gave orders in fluent Turkish to the commander of the fortress of Giurgiu to open the gates, enabling the Wallachian soldiers to break into the fortress and capture it. He invaded the Ottoman Empire, devastating the villages along the Danube. He informed Matthias Corvness about the military action in a letter on 11 February 1462. He stated that more than 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians had been killed at his order during the campaign. He sought military assistance from Corvness, declaring that he has broken the peace with the Sultan for the honor of the king and the Holy Crown of Hungary and for the preservation of Christianity and the strengthening of the Catholic faith. The relationship between Moldavia and Wallacha had become tense by 1462, according to a letter of the Genoese governor of Kaffa. Having learned of Vlad's invasion, Mehmed raised an army of more than 150,000 strong. That was said to be second in size only to the one that occupied Constantinople in 1453, according to Chalkikandils. The size of the army suggests that the Sultan wanted to occupy Wallacha, according to a number of historians. On the other hand, Mehmed had granted Wallacha to Vlad's brother, Radu, before the invasion of Wallacha, showing that the Sultan's principal purpose was only the change of the ruler of Wallacha. The Ottoman fleet landed at Dracula in May. The main Ottoman army crossed the Danube under the command of the Sultan at Nicopolis on 5 June 1462. Outnumbered by the enemy, Vlad adopted a scorched earth policy and retreated towards Targovist. During the night of 16 or 17 of June, Vlad broke into the Ottoman camp in an attempt to capture or kill the Sultan. Either the imprisonment or the death of the Sultan would have caused a panic among the Ottomans, which could have enabled Vlad to defeat the Ottoman army. However, the Wallachans missed the court of the Sultan himself and attacked the tents of the viziers Mahmud Pasha and Isaac. Having failed to attack the Sultan's camp, Vlad and his retainers left the Ottoman camp and dawn. Mehmed entered Targovist at the end of June. The town had been deserted, but the Ottomans were horrified to discover a forest of the impaled, according to Chalkikandils. Tursunbeg recorded that the Ottomans suffered from the summer heat and thirst during the campaign. The Sultan had decided to retreat from Wallacha and march towards Dracula. Stephen of Moldavia hurried to Chilia to seize the important fortress where a Hungarian garrison had been placed. Vlad also departed for Chilia but left behind a troop 6,000 strong to try to hinder the march of the Sultan's army, but Ottomans defeated the Wallachans. Stephen of Moldavia was wounded during the siege of Chilia and returned to Moldavia before Vlad came to the fortress. The main Ottoman army left Wallacha, but Vlad's brother Radu and his Ottoman troops stayed behind in the Bergen plain. Radu sent messengers to the Wallachans, reminding them that the Sultan could again invade their country. Although Vlad defeated Radu and his Ottoman allies in 2 battles during the following months, more and more Wallachans deserted Radu. Vlad withdrew to the Carpathian Mountains, hoping that Matthias Corvness would help him regain his throne. However, Albert of Szeklis had recommended in mid-August that the Saxons recognize Radu. Radu also made an offer to the burghers of Brasov to confirm their commercial privileges and pay them a compensation of 15,000 ducats. Matthias Corvness came to Transylvania in November 1462. The negotiations between Corvness and Vlad lasted for weeks, but Corvness did not want to wage war against the Ottoman Empire. At the king's order, his Czech mercenary commander, John Jiskra of Brandes, captured Vlad near Rukar in Wallacha. To provide an explanation for Vlad's imprisonment to Pope Pius and the Venetians, Corvness presented 3 letters, allegedly written by Vlad on 7 November 1462, to Mehmed Pasha, and Stephen of Moldavia. According to the letters, Vlad offered to join his forces with the Sultan's army against Hungary if the Sultan restored him to his throne. Most historians agree that the documents were forged to give grounds for Vlad's imprisonment. Corvness court historian, Antonio Bonfini, admitted that the reason for Vlad's imprisonment was never clarified. Farska writes the style of writing, the rhetoric of meat submission, clumsy wording, and poor Latin are all evidence that the letters could not be written on Vlad's order. He associates the author of the forgery with a Saxon priest of Brasov. Vlad was first imprisoned in the city of Belgrade according to Chalco-Kinviles. Before long, he was taken to Visegrad, where he was held for 14 years. No documents referring to Vlad between 1462 and 1475 have been preserved. In the summer of 1475, Stephen of Moldavia sent his envoys to Matthias Corvness, asking him to send Vlad to Wallacha against Basarab Laeta, who has submitted himself to the Ottomans. Stefan wanted to secure Wallacha for a ruler who had been an enemy of the Ottoman Empire, because the Wallachans like the Turks to the Moldavians, according to his letter. According to the Slavic stories about Vlad, he was only released after he converted to Catholicism. Matthias Corvness recognized Vlad as the lawful prince of Wallacha, but he did not provide him military assistance to regain his principality. Vlad settled in a house in Pest. When the group of soldiers broke into the house while pursuing a thief who had tried to hide there, Vlad had their commander executed because they had not asked for his permission before entering his home, according to the Slavic stories about his life. Vlad moved to Transylvania in June 1475. He wanted to settle in Sibiu and sent his envoy to the town in early June to arrange a house for him. Mehmed acknowledged Basarab Laeta as the lawful ruler of Wallacha. Corvness ordered the burghers of Sibiu to give 200 golden florins to Vlad from the royal revenues on 21 September, but Vlad left Transylvania for Buda in October. Vlad bought a house in Pécs that became known as Dracula. In January 1476, John Pongrak of Dengeleg, voivode of Transylvania, urged the people of Brasov to send to Vlad all those of his supporters who have settled in the town, because Corvness and Basarab Laeta had concluded a treaty. The relationship between the Transylvanian Saxons and Basarab remained tense, and the Saxons gave shelter to Basarab's opponents during the following months. Corvness dispatched Vlad and the Serbian Vukovic to fight against the Ottomans in Bosnia in early 1476. They captured Srebrenica and other fortresses in February and March 1476. Mehmed invaded Moldavia and defeated Stephen in the Battle of Valia Alba on the 26th of July 1476. Stephen Bathory and Vlad entered Moldavia, forcing the Sultan to lift the siege of the fortress at Targunem in late August, according to a letter of Matthias Corvness. The contemporaneous Jacob Unrest added that Vukovic and a member of the noble Jaksic family also participated in the struggle against the Ottomans in Moldavia. Matthias Corvness ordered the Transylvanian Saxons to support Bathory's planned invasion of Wallacha on 6 September 1476, also informing them that Stephen of Moldavia would also invade Wallacha. Vlad stayed in Brasov and confirmed the commercial privileges of the local burghers in Wallacha on 7 October 1476. Bathory's forces captured Targovist on 8 November. Stephen of Moldavia and Vlad ceremoniously confirmed their alliance, and occupied Bucharest, forcing Basarab Laeta to seek refuge in the Ottoman Empire on 16 November. Vlad informed the merchants of Brasov about his victory, urging them to come to Wallacha. He was crowned before 26 November. Basarab-Laida returned to Wallacha with Ottoman support, and Vlad died fighting against them in late December 1476 or early January 1477. In a letter written on the 10th January 1477, Stephen of Moldavia related that Vlad's Moldavian retinue had also been massacred. According to Leonardo Botta, the Milanese ambassador to Buda, the Ottomans cut Vlad's corpse into pieces. Bonfini wrote that Vlad's head was sent to Mend. The place of his burial is unknown. According to popular tradition, Vlad was buried in the monastery of Snagov. However, the excavations carried out by Danuvi Rossetti in 1933 found no tomb below the supposed unmarked tombstone of Vlad in the monastery church. Rossetti reported under the tombstone attributed to Vlad there was no tomb. Only many bones and jaws of horses. Historian Konstantin Razachevisi said Vlad was most probably buried in the first church of the Kamana monastery, which had been established by Vlad and was near the battlefield where he was killed. The stories about Vlad made him the best-known ruler of the Romanian lands in Europe. However, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was published in 1897, was the first book to make a connection between Dracula and vampirism. Stoker had his attention drawn to the blood-sucking vampires or Romanian folklore by Emily Gerald's article about Transylvanian superstitions. His limited knowledge about the medieval history of Wallacha came from William Wilkinson's book entitled Account of the Principalities of Wallacha and Moldavia with political observations relative to them, published in 1820. Stoker apparently did not know much about Vlad the Impaler, certainly not enough for us to say that Vlad was the inspiration for Count Dracula, according to Elizabeth Miller. For instance, Stoker writes that Dracula had been of Sheikly origin only because he knew about both Attila the Hun's destructive campaigns and the alleged Huck origin of the Sheiklies. Stoker's main source, Wilkinson, who accepted the reliability of the German stories, described Vlad as a wicked man. Actually, Stoker's working papers for his book contain no references to the historical figure, the name of the character being named in all drafts but the later ones Count Wapier. Consequently, Stoker borrowed the name and scraps of miscellaneous information about the history of Wallacha when writing his book about Count Dracula.